The delegation from the Galactic Concord arrived at Sol like a storm, expecting fierce resistance. 50 warships, each one a masterpiece of alien engineering, sleek, angular, and unmistakably predatory, dropped out of hyperspace in perfect, menacing formation. At their heart floated the diplomatic barge, a majestic floating crystal cathedral that bristled with every advanced sensor array and shielded emitter the Concord could assemble. Warlord Thrax stood tall and imposing on the command bridge, his massive reptilian frame rigid with tension, his claws flexed rhythmically, scraping lightly against the metal rail, while his scales rippled with barely contained fury. His sharp eyes burned with intensity as they locked onto the main view screen, fixed on the modest yellow star glowing steadily ahead. "Full tactical scan," he snarled, his deep voice rumbling like grinding stones through the bridge chamber. "Probe every asteroid, every moon, every shadow and debris field in this entire system. If these so-called makers have hidden even a single minefield, a stealth drone, or any sign of a secret fleet waiting in ambush, I want it cataloged immediately. I will not be humiliated by these primitives a second time." The sensors swept outward in powerful overlapping waves, probing deep into every corner of the Sol system. Streams of data flooded the consoles in real time. They found almost nothing. No planet-killing battle stations orbiting the gas giants. No ghost fleets lurking silently in the cold darkness of the Kuiper Belt. No superweapons aimed inward from the distant fringes of the Oort cloud. Instead, the scans revealed only a peaceful blue-green world turning gently under its unassuming yellow sun. A handful of modest orbital shipyards drifted in high orbit. Practical structures that looked more like busy workshops than military fortresses. Small scientific habitats were scattered across the red plains of Mars and the icy moons of Jupiter, clearly focused on settlement, research, and quiet recovery rather than war. The only truly notable readings came from the sun itself, perfectly stable and radiating with that now familiar subtle quantum watermark pulsing through every hyperspace gate across the galaxy. Thrax's powerful tail lashed violently against the deck plating, the impact echoing sharply. This is their great stronghold? Their supposed seat of power after 12,000 years of hiding in the shadows? Pathetic. A Deathworld savage playing at being gods with nothing but scraps of old code and desperate childish hope. A priority transmission suddenly cut through the fleet comms, overriding every security protocol with effortless authority. The main view screen resolved into the calm, weathered face of Captain Alara Voss. She stood on a simple wooden porch overlooking a vast, rolling ocean on Earth. A gentle breeze tugged at strands of her dark hair. Behind her, children laughed freely and chased one another across sunlit grass beneath a sky painted with steady, familiar constellations. The patched blue jumpsuit was the same one she had worn in the council chamber, practical, faded from long use, bearing the Soulforge Recovery Division patch at the shoulder. "Warlord Thrax," she said evenly, her storm-gray eyes steady and completely unflinching. "You brought quite the welcoming party this time." Still afraid of a few tired engineers from a back's bared rows of serrated teeth and leaned forward aggressively, his massive frame casting a long shadow across the bridge. His voice boomed with raw challenge. "We came for truth, human. Your clever parlor tricks with the lattice impressed the cowards back at the core. But power without real teeth is meaningless in the end. Show us your fleets, show us your weapons, or admit this is all ancient code running on borrowed time and nothing more." Captain Alara Voss's storm-gray eyes didn't waver for even a heartbeat. A small, knowing smile touched her lips, not mocking, but carrying the quiet weight of deep, hard-earned understanding. "You still think this is about weapons and conquest?" She made a small, almost casual gesture with one hand, as if simply turning an old dial on a familiar control panel back home on Earth. In that instant, every warship in the Concord delegation went completely dark. Bridge lights died across the entire fleet in a cascading wave. Main engines fell utterly silent, leaving the massive vessels drifting powerless on nothing but residual momentum. Weapon capacitors drained to zero in seconds, their deadly payloads rendered inert. Emergency backup systems whined uselessly in the cold void as the hyperspace lattice itself simply ignored their desperate hails and commands, treating the advanced warships like forgotten toys whose power had been casually switched off at the source. Panic flared instantly across all encrypted channels. Alarms blared in a dozen alien languages, crews shouted frantic orders, bridge officers scrambled at consoles that no longer responded as they should. Voss's voice remained soft and composed, cutting clearly through the growing chaos like a calm anchor in a raging storm. The lattice isn't a weapon, Thrax, it's infrastructure. Plumbing, if you prefer the simple term from our old Earth stories. You've all been living in a grand house we built long ago, drinking from pipes we laid when your ancestors were still figuring out fire and basic tools, and you've been throwing tantrums whenever the taps sputtered or the lights flickered unexpectedly. We just closed the main valve for a moment, to get your full attention and make the point clear. She paused deliberately, letting the heavy silence settle across the powerless fleet like a blanket. We can open it again whenever we choose, or we can leave it closed as long as necessary until the lesson sinks in. One by one, systems began to reboot across the Concorde ships under her silent command. Lights flickered back on hesitantly at first, then more steadily. Engines hummed back to life with reluctant whines and vibrations, but the lesson lingered heavily in the stunned silence that followed. 50 warships, the pride of the Concorde's military might, rendered completely harmless with nothing more than a quiet thought and an ancient override code from a small blue world on the galactic fringe. Thrax slammed a clawed fist into the console with explosive force, cracking the crystal surface with a sharp, echoing report that rang through the bridge. Sparks flew briefly. Then why not seize the entire galaxy while you hold the advantage? Why not rule as the old legends claim the Makers once did, with absolute power and divine authority over all species? Because we already tried being gods once, Voss answered quietly, her voice carrying a trace of ancient weariness mixed with hard-won wisdom that resonated across the open channel. We lit the stars so life could bloom across the cold void between them. We wove the hyperspace web so younger species could travel safely between those stars without being torn apart by cosmic forces or random supernovae. And we watched as empires rose on our scaffolding, only to tear one another apart over who owned the biggest piece of the playground we had prepared. So we went home to Sol. We healed our own scarred death world after its long series of dark ages, wars, and self-inflicted. We raised our children under real natural skies instead of these carefully engineered lights you call stars. We buried our dead with quiet dignity. We told them stories around campfires about the distant day when the galaxy might finally be ready to share the stars without breaking them for sport or ego. She stepped calmly aside on the weathered wooden porch, the old boards creaking softly under her boots. A young girl, no more than 8 years old, with the same sharp storm-gray eyes as her mother, and a playful smudge of dirt across one cheek from running through the grass, walked shyly into the frame. She clutched a child's colorful drawing tightly in her small hands, fingers smudged with crayon wax. The picture showed stick-figure humans and aliens of every imaginable shape and size holding hands together beneath a bright, friendly yellow sun, simple lines, innocent smiles, and a border of tiny stars, full of unfiltered hope and trust. It was the exact same image that had once brought the entire council chamber of the Galactic Concorde to stunned, breathless silence many light years away. Voss knelt briefly, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face with a touch full of quiet love and exhaustion. The girl looked up at her mother with wide, wondering eyes before turning toward the camera, holding the drawing higher as if offering it to the stars themselves. "This is what we truly came back for," Captain Alara Voss said, her voice warm, yet carrying a deeper ache of long-held weariness. She rested a gentle, protective hand on her daughter's shoulder as she continued. "Not tribute or precious resources stripped from distant worlds. Not worship or trembling fear from those who once called us legends or gods in their ancient archives. Not even thanks, though that would ease the weight after 12,000 long years of keeping the lights on alone through every storm our species faced." Her storm-gray eyes softened with quiet longing. "Just a simple, honest promise that when we eventually hand the full override codes back, and we will once you've truly earned it through real actions and not just pretty diplomatic words, you won't immediately start breaking the house again like unruly children fighting over the biggest toys in the playground we left behind for you." Thrax stared fixedly at the child on the massive view screen, at the innocent, crayon-bright drawing with its joyful, trusting figures, at the small human woman who had just disabled an entire armed invasion fleet without ever raising her voice, firing a single shot, or even leaving the safe surface of her quiet blue world. Something deep inside the warlord cracked. His burning rage flickered and dimmed noticeably for the first time since the delegation had dropped out of hyperspace. His massive claws loosened their iron grip on the rail as a cold, unsettling realization settled in his scaled chest. Humanity had never actually needed conquest or brute domination to control the galaxy. They had simply built it from the ground up with patience, stubborn ingenuity, and quiet, unbreakable hope, and then waited for 12,000 years for its so-called children to grow up and finally behave like responsible caretakers instead of tyrants. Around him on the bridge, other delegates and officers shifted uneasily, their own emotions surfacing in raw waves. Scales rustled with doubt, tentacles twitched with hesitant wonder, and crystalline facets flickered through uncertain colors of awe and shame. The crystalline elder aboard the diplomatic barge finally broke the heavy, loaded silence that had fallen over the fleet. His inner light glowed with quiet, trembling awe mixed with genuine humility, as he spoke for many who had been silently listening, his voice cracking slightly. Captain Voss, those of us who still remember what genuine gratitude feels like accept your terms with open hearts and no hidden clauses. We will send scholars, engineers, teachers, and diplomats, not soldiers or additional warships bristling with unnecessary weapons. The galaxy has bled enough under its own short-sighted empires and endless, pointless power struggles. It is time we learned from those who first lit the stars and left the lights on for us all this time, patiently waiting in the dark while we played at being masters. Voss offered a small, genuinely tired but warm smile that reached all the way to her storm-gray eyes, carrying the relief of a long journey finally finding its purpose. The gentle wind from the nearby ocean tugged at her dark hair as she nodded once, the simple gesture full of quiet, heartfelt hope. Good. That's a solid and honest start. One we can build on together for all our children. She squeezed her daughter's shoulder gently. Bring your young ones to Sol when you feel truly ready, not as trophies or bargaining chips, but as children ready to learn, explore, and play without fear. Let them run together under the stars we built as a shared gift for every species that calls this galaxy home. Teach them the old lullaby our children once sang to calm the night when the dark felt too big and the future too uncertain. Maybe, just maybe, the next 12,000 years will be kinder, wiser, and far less lonely for every species involved in this grand, messy, beautiful galaxy we all share. As the transmission ended on that quiet promise of shared tomorrows and healing, the Concord warships powered down their remaining weapons systems voluntarily, ship by ship, the lights on their hulls dimming in a wave of newfound humility. Their once aggressive, tight formation slowly loosened into something gentler and more respectful. A humble procession of guests rather than conquerors or invaders. One by one the vessels adjusted course toward the little blue-green world hanging peacefully in the distance like a precious living jewel under its steady yellow sun, the first tentative steps of a long journey toward understanding and belonging. As the transmission ended on that quiet promise of shared tomorrows and healing, a profound stillness settled over the Concord delegation. The once menacing warships powered down their remaining weapon systems voluntarily, ship by ship. Lights on their sleek hulls dimmed in a slow, respectful wave. Their aggressive formation loosened into something gentler, a humble procession of guests rather than conquerors. One by one the vessels adjusted course toward the little blue-green world of Earth, hanging peacefully in the distance like a precious living jewel beneath its steady yellow sun. For the first time in 12,000 years, the children of the galaxy were coming home. On Earth's surface, Captain Alara Voss knelt in the soft grass beside her daughter. The young girl pointed upward with pure, unfiltered wonder at the night sky, now steadier and noticeably brighter than it had been in countless generations. The stars seemed to shine with a new warmth, as if they too were breathing a long-held sigh of relief. "Mommy? The stars are saying hello again," the girl whispered, her small voice full of awe. "They look happy tonight, like they missed us." Voss pulled her daughter close, kissing the top of her head with a tenderness born from centuries of quiet endurance. Her storm-gray eyes glistened with unshed tears, not of sorrow, but of deep, exhausted relief. "They always were, sweetheart," she whispered back, voice thick with emotion. "We just had to remind everyone who left the lights on for all this time, who built them so our children, all children, could one." Far above the peaceful blue world, the ancient hyperspace lattice sang once more in perfect harmonious alignment. It was a deep, resonant song that only humanity had ever truly known the full words to. A lullaby carried gently across every sector, every trade route, and every quiet colony. The background hum of the galaxy shifted, growing calmer, stronger, more alive. Across 1,000 inhabited worlds, the children of 100 different species looked up at night skies, but no longer flickered or threatened to fail. Merchants discovered safe, efficient routes where danger once ruled the void. Farmers watched their seasons settle into a gentle, predictable rhythm that promised abundant harvests for generations to come. Old soldiers and weary leaders laid down weapons they no longer needed to clutch in fear of losing the stars themselves. The Makers had not returned as thunderous conquerors demanding tribute. They had not come as distant gods expecting worship or kneeling subjects. They had simply come back as tired, stubborn, endlessly patient parents and engineers, the ones who had kept the lights burning steadily for 12,000 years, through ice ages, wars, pandemics, and humanity's own painful mistakes on one small, resilient blue rock circling an ordinary yellow sun. And somewhere in a modest shipyard on Earth, a simple painted symbol still adorned the hull of a patched recovery vessel, a child's innocent stick-figure hand reaching up trustingly to touch a bright, welcoming yellow star. The galaxy was no longer parentless. It was at long last coming home to the family that had never truly left. The stars remembered their makers, and for the first time in 12,000 years, the children of the galaxy were ready to grow up together. The end.